So welcome everybody, and thank you very much for inviting me and for the very warm welcome in Novi Sad again. I'd like to take you on a tour of the Kunsthistorisches Museum in Vienna in Austria in search of stereotypes and role models. So probably I show you the museum first, and then let's directly go inside. And as you can see, the architecture is not as welcoming as in the City Museum of Helsinki, for example, what we saw some minutes ago. So we have to welcome young people with the help of our programs, obviously. And like the programs are about different topics, obviously too, and the one I want to present you is about gender. So what do we do concerning gender in the Kunsthistorisches Museum with the help of museums mediation in the education department. Let's start directly there in the staircase. If we look up to the ceiling, that's what we see. It's the clarification of Renaissance by Michael Munkaci. And like, it's also about like typical distribution of roles of gender on 110 square meters. Let's have a closer look. Women are allegories of glory and fame of exclusively male painters. Women also serve as nude models, which are looked at by men. And another detail from the same staircase shows a male painter, this is Leonardo da Vinci by the way, and a female model. So that's the way it goes. Men are looking, and women are being looked at. Active men, passive women. That's what we find in the beginning of the Kunsthistorisches Museum in the staircase. And this often applies not only to the painter, like this male gaze, but also to the later viewer in front of the painting. So in past centuries, the viewers of paintings were mostly male. So it's all about the male gaze. And the male gaze is the act of depicting women and the world from a masculine perspective that presents women as sexual objects for the pleasure of the male viewer. So in the staircase of the Kunsthistorisches Museum and in art history in general, I would say, the woman is thus often assigned the role of the passive, beautiful, mostly naked model. In the painting from the staircase that shows Raphael and his model, like she's fully dressed, not naked. She's Mother Mary playing with her son Jesus Christ. So another common role of women, and again not only in art history probably, is that role of the mother. And I will now take you to another collection, to a first collection of the museum, to the Kunstkammer, the Cabinet of Curiosities, where we will meet a whole family. These are so-called proportion figures. They help artists to correctly portray the human body. That's what they look like today. And those figures from the 16th century reflect the gender roles of the time. You see the pelvis of the woman, which is quite like voluminous. The voluminous pelvis of the female figure emphasizes the main duty of the woman, which at least in those times was giving birth to children. In proportion, the man's head, compared with the woman's head, is much larger than hers. You see that from the presentation? This underlines a certain understanding of gender roles. Men do the thinking. You're kind of laughing, but no, they're too quiet to laugh. But these stereotypes still exist today, I think. Let me tell you an anecdote from a guided tour I did with 14-year-olds in our last special exhibition. This painting had been on show there. It's from London. And I asked the teenagers what they saw. And one girl replied, a woman taking care of the injured man. If we look closer, we see that she's holding a dagger in her hand. She's a Muslim magician, like a Muslim witch probably, and he wanted to kill the sleeping Christian besieger, the enemy. She then falls in love with him, and we can see that this little cupid is preventing her from killing him, so she actually does not kill him. But like the girl saw a woman taking care of the man. She probably saw what she used to see. Let me give you some numbers. This diagram shows nursing and care stuff in Austria by gender. Probably it's not so much different in your country. So 92% of the people working in the mobile nursing service are women. Only 8% men, as shown in the left column here. More men work in the inpatient service, but it's still 84% women. So we all see what we know, and we all think in drawers. Maybe I would not call it activism yet, but in my opinion it's an important task of our work in museums to break down those stereotypes and prejudices, right? And I'm sure that that girl who described what she saw in this painting was probably frightened or at least irritated by her own thinking patterns. So irritation is where thinking starts. Our work in the museums, in the education department, sets impulses for free, autonomous thinking and acting. In order to achieve that, we develop programs about socially relevant topics, not only gender, but like this is an example I present today, what gender is art. I slightly changed the title. In the course of the workshops, the 15 to 19-year-olds work in small groups, and they conquer the museum space with the help of a floor plan on their own. So they become active themselves, too. They question the role of women in the art world. We already, now during the presentation, made women as nude models or as mothers in the staircase or in the Kunstkammer. Another role of women is very present in the picture gallery. So let me bring you to the picture gallery of the Kunsthistorisches Museum. It's the role of the woman as a seducer, as femme fatale, probably. So these are only a few randomly chosen examples. There would be many, many more. In the upper row, you see like many representations of Judith and Holofernes, Judith which has killed Holofernes, and in the lower row it's Salome, who killed St. John the Baptist, so both stories from the Bible, from the Old and the New Testament. And in both cases, women use their feminine charms to seduce and actually kill the opponent, the enemy. In theological interpretation, both of them, Judith and Salome, are seen as courageous heroines. But if we think a little more closely, for example, in the picture gallery of the Kunsthistorisches Museum, we can also find strong women who did not commit a brutal murder. There is the heroine Atalante, for instance. And let me tell you the story about Atalante, probably you know. Still, I'll say some words about her being a woman in a mythological story, an antique myth. When Atalante was born, her father was disappointed because she was just a girl, and that's why he abandoned her. So Atalante was raised by hunters in the woods, and she grew up to a brave hunter too. The years went by, and at a time the king of the region forgot to sacrifice to the goddess of the hunt. And as punishment, the goddess sends a wild boar, which you can see in the painting, and the boar destroys not only the harvest, but also kills like cattle, animals, and people. The king then gathered together the bravest Greek heroes to kill that wild boar. And there was one heroine, Atalante. This led to different reactions. A few men complained because they thought women shouldn't take part in a hunt. Others even tried to rape her, unsuccessfully though. In the painting we see the moment when the hunters face the boar. And it's Atalante who shoots the first arrow that hits the animal on the head. You probably might see that the animal is hurt and that there's an arrow in the head close to the ear. And now that the animal was injured and distracted, Meleager could finally kill it. For Meleager, who had fallen in love with Atalante, it was clear that the victory was due to her. The other men disagreed though, and the discussion started all over again. What is the role of a woman? Can a woman hunt? Can she be the victor? Atalante's father, on the other hand, was so proud of his daughter's performance that he acknowledged her as his daughter again. And convinced that he knew what was best for her, he promised her to a man, ignoring the fact that she had sworn virginity and did not want to marry at all. So, you see, the role of women is not easy, even in ancient myth. So let's go back to real life and meet another powerful woman. It's Maria Theresia. She was the only female ruler of the Habsburg dynasty, and so to say the first woman to rule in Austria almost 300 years ago. Nonetheless, we see both women, like the brave Atalante, the hunter, and the powerful Maria Theresia through the eyes of male painters. So still it's the male gaze. So let me ask you something. There are 8,146 paintings in the collection of the Kunsthistorisches Museum. What do you think? How many were painted by women? Any guess? I didn't get it. 5? 15? 15? 20? Okay, almost it's 12. And among 650 painters, there are 8 women. So some of the 8 women painted 2 or 3 paintings. And 6 of the 12 paintings that were painted by women are still lifes. So these are just like 3 examples. And there is a hierarchy of paintings. And as you can see in the hierarchy here, still life painting is at the bottom and history painting at the top. So why do you female painters mainly paint pictures of the lowest category? And speaking about stereotypes, they all show flowers. One reason is that women did not have access to education. They were not allowed to draw in front of an unclothed male or female nude model, for example, that was considered indecent. They therefore could not study the human body, which you need for history paintings, for example. So in terms of education, women had a clear disadvantage over the male colleagues. And flower still lifes are simply a consequence of the conditions under which they painted. And since women had bad chances on the art market, being women, some of them probably pretended to be men. So meaning that they signed their paintings with a male name in order to be able to sell them. Furthermore, art history was initially written exclusively by men, and women were made invisible by historiography, one could say. And somehow they are still invisible today, because those 3 examples are not on show in the picture gallery of the Kunsthistorisches Museum. Like only 2 paintings by women are on show in the picture gallery at the moment. There is a 3rd one that's had been loaned to a special exhibition to Italy, to Milan, and maybe when it comes back there will be 3. At the moment there's only 2 paintings on show in the Kunsthistorisches Museum made by women from, like, let's say, 800 paintings on show. This still life, for example, is by Maria van Oosterwijk, is on show. She integrates a very small and hidden self-portrait. If you take a look at the glass vessel on the left of the picture, and try to make it bigger, let's see whether it works out, you can see the reflection of the painter in her studio. So it's very tiny, it's very difficult to see it. Probably it's easier to see it there than in front of the original, but at least Maria van Oosterwijk tried to be there, tried to be self-confident in her painting. And there's a second woman who managed to become a successful artist in the male-dominated art world. Probably not only art world, but world in general. She's called Michalina Wouthiers. And her Bacchanal, the topic of this huge painting, is also exhibited. That's the second one. We see the god of wine in the middle of the picture. He's almost naked and attracts all attention. Probably that's the attempt to reverse the idea of the male gaze, that it's a male body being looked at here. The woman on the right could be Michalina Wouthiers herself, so probably also she inserted a self-portrait in her painting. The woman gazes self-confidently at the viewer, and one can say that Wouthiers did not stick to the role into which society wanted to push her as a woman. She painted all genres, from still life, the button, to genre paintings and portraits, up to history paintings, like this one, for example, this party scene we can see here. And all this, even in monumental size, which women painters were thought incapable of creating. So this painting is more than 3.5 meters long, it's huge, compared to the small flower still lifes we saw before, which is difficult in a presentation because all the paintings look the same size, but this one is huge, the smaller, the other still lifes are smaller. And yet, although she was self-confident and like also successful, she's an example of a forgotten and long ignored female artist. Like male art historians obviously could just not imagine that this painting was painted by a woman, and although it is mentioned in the inventory of the commissioner in the 17th century when it was made, the painting was attributed to male artists until the 1960s. And it has only recently been exhibited in the picture gallery of the Kunsthistorisches Museum some years ago. So it's quite likely that there are actually many more than 12 paintings by female artists in the collections of the museum and also in the collections of other museums, wrongly attributed to male artists and still waiting to be discovered. In any case, like art historians have a lot of work to do, I think. In the meantime, till we discover all those female artists that might have been working for centuries, we can raise awareness of the situation of female artists with our programs we do in the museums, with our theme tours, for example. And this is exactly what the Guerrilla Girls, a group of feminist activist artists, do. I let them speak in a quote from their website. What do they do? Who are they? That's what they say. Our anonymity keeps the focus on the issues and away from who we might be. We wear gorilla masks in public and use facts, humor, and outrageous visuals to expose gender and ethnic bias, as well as corruption in politics, art, film, and pop culture. We undermine the idea of a mainstream narrative by revealing the understory, the subtext, the overlooked, and the downright unfair. We believe in an intersectional feminism that fights discrimination and supports human rights for all people and all genders. We have done over 100 street projects, posters, and stickers all over the world. We also do projects and exhibitions at museums, attacking them for their bad behavior and discriminatory practices right on their own walls. We could be anyone. We are everywhere. What's next? More creative complaining. Just an example of their work is this letter to a dearest art collector, and they address this dearest art collector. It has come to our attention that your collection, like most, does not contain enough art by women. We know that you feel terrible about this and will rectify the situation immediately. All our love, Guerrilla Girls. So, one tool to raise awareness. Another tool with which we reach in the Kunsthistorisches Museum, we try to reach a broader public and bring like the contents of the artworks closer to the reality of our guests, probably of our young guests, is our app KHM Stories, which we presented here in the Galeria Matica Srpska during the conference Open Museums 2 years ago already. So just shortly, the app offers theme tours throughout the collections of the museum on topics such as climate change, that's the tour of Snowball's Chance on the upper left, or social inequalities like glamour and grind on the upper right, which is cut off here, or ideas of beauty like the tour Building Bodies. This is a screen. This is a screen, 2 screens, from our children's tour, Superpower, Heroes and Heroines from the Ancient World. And let me check whether the video goes now. Does it go? Yes. Yeah. So this is just a GIF, just like something fun. You might recognize the boar as the one from the painting of the heroine Atalante. The next screen. Did it check? No. That's right. This is a screen from the tour Bodies Unlimited. 2 screens from Bodies Unlimited. The app allows users to get active too. They can, for example, create their own ideal of beauty from parts of bodies they met during the tour, and they can share their ideal of beauty then with friends. I built the body on the right for you just yesterday to give you an impression, and I put ideal of beauty in quotation marks because the message of the tour actually is that there is nothing like an ideal of beauty. Like what is considered beautiful depends on the time and the culture in which it is found and will always continue to change. We all know beauty lies in the eye of the beholder, right? So this is the idea of putting in a nutshell that there is not an ideal of beauty. You have to search for or reach. And this seems an important message in times of size 0 plastic surgery and Photoshop, in which we and young people are constantly confronted with impossible role models. So let's listen to an audio text from the tour Bodies Unlimited.
Time if he or she wanted to find a female figure that would meet the requirements for a top model of today. This sculpture
It didn't start in the beginning. So it started, a model scout would have to look for a long time, sorry it's so small, he or she wanted to find a female figure that would meet requirements for a top model of today. That's what we just missed, because I think we tried the video before and it didn't start from the beginning, so let's go on. You can read the text too.
It's at least one of the most important requirements. Her long, slender legs are ideal for presenting skinny jeans. The hip swing also reminds one of the poses made by models in fashion shows today. However, this model still needs to work a bit on her posture. But with the right high heels and the right training, you could almost imagine her on the runway. But is this even a woman?
Actually, it could just as well be a man. The towel around the hips covers the genitals of this flat-breasted figure. Today, this wouldn't hinder a career as a top model. A current trend displays figures which tend to be rather androgynous, not distinctly male or female. Models who present men's as well as women's clothing are no longer a rarity. Since 2014, Andrea Page was voted onto the list of the 100 sexiest women, as well as the list of the top 50 male models, all in 1 year. At the time to which this sculpture was made, blurred borders between the sexes and extremely skinny bodies were absolutely not considered sexy.
Here's one more.
When this sculpture was created in the Baroque era, the ideal woman looked absolutely different. Always well padded and with distinctive curves, completely incapable of fitting into the controversial size 0. Back in those days, it wasn't a matter of course that people had a sufficient diet. As a result of this, females with voluptuous figures were considered attractive. Liposuction would have been greeted with a total lack of understanding. In parts of the world where food is not available in abundance, this view still exists even today. However, ideal figures here are completely different. Therefore, the imparting of physical ideals was not what was intended by the lean woman in our sculpture. Her furious facial expression is also everything but ideal. But who or what should this sculpture actually portray?
If you want to know who or what the sculpture portrays, I think you have to download the app. By the way, it's also available in your language, which might be confusing for you because you make this mixture of Bosnian, Croatian, and Serbian, which we call BKS, because we try to reach a local public, and so we didn't choose to make it only in Serbian and not reaching the Croatians living in Vienna. That's why in Vienna there is used this mixture of the 3 languages, BKS. Probably we can talk about this in the discussion afterwards. It's a very difficult topic also for us and for the guests, for the users of the app, for everyone obviously. This solution which is not a clear solution. Still you might be able to understand the BKS version of the app. I chose the English version to let everybody understand in the room here. So what we do in the app actually is that we associate a 17th century ivory sculpture with a transgender model. Perhaps too daring for one or the other, probably also here in the room. For us, it was the opportunity to offer a wide range of role models and to deconstruct stereotypes in the end. And diverse types of gender identity and sexual preferences have always existed. And they can also be found in the historical collections of the Kunsthistorisches Museum, for example. In June last year, Europride took place in Vienna. And on this occasion, we developed a diverse and queer event program. Let me give you some examples for gender identity in old master paintings or other artworks. So, for example, there is homosexuality and bisexuality, of course. We all know examples of LGBTI history, like same-sex love between men in ancient Greece and Rome. We know many rulers who both had wives and male partners. Among them, the three you can see here, for example, is Hadrian, Trajan, and Alexander the Great. From today's perspective, one could speak of bisexuality or homosexuality. And similar things can be assumed of women in antiquity, but they were hardly even allowed to participate in public life, and that's why the records of their sexual interests and love just are very rare. There is a great deal of artists whose sexual preferences have been speculated about, even during their lifetime. For example, Caravaggio, who might have been bisexual. And even at the Habsburg court in Vienna, there are records of same-sex love. It's Isabella of Bourbon-Parma. She was 19 years old when she was married to the later Emperor Joseph II, and she exchanged letters with her sister-in-law. And the letter suggests that the two women were joined in more than just mutual admiration. So these are kind of erotic letters. Then there's intersexuality. Intersex people are born with sex characteristics that do not match typical definitions of male or female bodies. This kind of natural variance has always existed. And the most famous intersex character of antiquity, or antique antique myth, is called Hermaphroditus. However, artists were uncertain whether to and how to depict intersex bodies. So that what we see here in Sprague's painting shows a classical female nude instead of the intersexual body. So this is the moment before the fusion of the two bodies. The nymph we can see on the left falls in love with him on the right and pulls him under the water. Probably it was something like rape that the woman did with a man. And she prays to the gods that the two may never again be separated. So that's why the two bodies were made one. Another example is travesty. The painting shows the hero Hercules, who had to serve the queen Omphale, we can see from backside, as a slave. The two fell in love, and for their own amusement, or maybe even to spice up their love life, they swapped clothes. That's what happened. So he's wearing her cloth, and she's wearing his cloth, new cloth. Like with the cloth, they also swap their social roles, what's described in the myth. He feels more submissive and inferior, and she gains prestige and power wearing the cloth of the other person, which is also pretty interesting. And someone who also crosses gender boundaries is my colleague Benjamin. From time to time, he becomes the drag queen Tife Kümmernis and hosts queer tours in the picture gallery. I think to have a diverse team is probably the easiest way to reach a diverse audience. And on the other hand, do those drag tours also raise awareness to gender topics amongst other visitors who didn't come for the queer tour or the drag tour, but are in the museum in general? Again, I let speak the expert, just as the Guerrilla Girls before. I let speak Benjamin himself.
I'm a drag queen. I'm a man by day, and sometimes I like to dress up and bring out everything that's androgynous about me. It's not that I have this deep yearning inside of me that I want to be a woman or I want to play a woman. It's much more that I want to blur the lines and become an extreme character. The spotlight is on you when you're in drag, and the people are gonna look at you. So you might as well use that attention and play with their expectations. I'm an art educator, I've studied art history, and I've done museum tours, and I've done drag on the side. I feel great about entertaining and educating people. And in the museum, there's so many unexplored queer sides of the old master paintings that I really wanted to highlight more. And I thought bringing an element into this pompous building that was clashing with glamour, I thought was necessary to kind of break it. You can find traces of homosexual behavior in all periods of human development. For instance, in Renaissance Italy, a lot of young men do it because they're expected to marry at 30-ish, and the women are expected to marry at 15 or 16. So there's a lot of sexually active time for young men there, where they can't really get with women. So it's the culture that really also fostered homosexual behavior. History writing, and it's also art history that tries to suppress it because it doesn't fit with our heteronormative image that we have of the past. All of those things are only really visible to the trained eye, to the historian, and I wanted to make that more accessible because I felt that as a queer man, I wasn't really represented. So men's and women fashion basically completely changed or swapped during the French Revolution. Before that, it was men showing their legs in tights, and it was all about the eroticism of long legs. It was about really depicting your genitals with a cock piece, and women were expected to have floor-length gowns that covered them up completely. So it was basically a reversal that was induced by the French Revolution when aristocratic fashion received, a road bump, a speed bump.
Everybody's restricted in what they're allowed to do. It's just that some people aren't bothered by it because they feel perfectly fine in their male or female socially enforced role. People who don't fit that mold often feel pushed to be a certain way. I did too. What I feel is most restrictive is the fact that men are not allowed softness. They're not allowed to be caring and show empathy. Also, I think that's something that keeps us from progressing as a society, because what we really need more of is empathy and care for each other. And if 50% of the world population are socially expected to show less of that, I think that holds us back.
Men are not allowed softness, they are not allowed to be caring and show empathy. That holds us back. So I say, let us not be held back. Let us critically reflect on identities, role models, social codes, and ideals. So what gender is art? If we look closely, we can find we can find caring fathers in the collection of the Kunsthistorisches Museum too. Not only main heroes, but also caring fathers. And let me finish with another anecdote from a guided tour with 7-year-olds. We looked at this very small painting showing the male hero Perseus freeing the naked, beautiful, chained and helpless Andromeda. And I will give the final word to a 7-year-old girl who described what she sees. She says, "She is naked because she took off her clothes and threw them to the monster to defend herself."